Welcome to Golden Software's video training for Grapher 12. Grapher is a powerful 2D and 3D graphing software package. In this video, I will cover how to link axes. Two or more axes can be linked by scale, limits, length, position, or tick mark spacing. To link two axes, select the axis that you wish to link to another. We will refer to this as the dependent axis, since it is dependent upon the axis it is linked to. Click the Link Axis tab in the Property Manager. Click the drop-down list in the Link Axis field and select the axis you wish to link the dependent axis to. We will refer to this as the controlling axis. Now that you've determined which axis is the controlling axis for your dependent axis, you just have to specify what properties are being controlled by the controlling axis. Once this is done, the linked property of the dependent axis will change as soon as that property is changed for the controlling axis. Because this change is automatic, the dependent axis's linked property or properties are shown in the Property Manager as linked, and thus cannot be edited manually. There are 6 different axis properties that can be linked: axis scale, tick spacing, limits, length, X position, and Y position. By default, when you create a graph in Grapher 12 that is one X and one Y axis, as we have done here, the Y position of the X axis is linked to the Y axis, and the X position of the Y axis is linked to the X axis. These defaults can be changed by clicking File, Defaults, clicking an axis in the Axes section on the left, and clicking to the Link Axis tab on the right. With the current defaults, when you click and drag the plot in the plot window, both axes move with it. The vertical position of an axis is controlled with the Link Y position option, and the horizontal position of an axis is controlled by the Link X position option. If we click on Y axis 1 in the Object Manager, on the Link Axis page in the Property Manager, we can see that the link axis is X axis 1, and the box next to Link X position is checked. This means that if you change the X position of the controlling axis, or click and drag it horizontally to move it, the dependent axis will move too, so the linked axes can keep the same relative positioning. With the Link X position box checked, we also have the option to set an X offset. You can change this value by using the arrows or by typing in a value. Positive values move the axis to the right, and negative values move it to the left. The Link Y position option is grayed out since the Y position of the X axis is currently controlled by the Y axis. If we click on X axis 1 in the Object Manager, on the Link Axis page in the Property Manager, we can see the link axis is Y axis 1, and the box next to Link Y position is checked. This means that if you change the Y position of the controlling axis, or click and drag it vertically to move it, the X-axis will move too. So again, the two keep the same relative positioning. With the Link Y position box checked, we have the option to set a Y offset. Again, you can change this value with the arrows or by typing in a value. Positive values move the axis up, and negative values move it down. The Link X position option is grayed out, since the X position of the Y-axis is controlled by the X-axis. Before we go over the other axes properties that can be linked, let's add another axis by using the Duplicate Axis command. By selecting an axis and clicking Graphs, Add to Graph, Duplicate Axis, then specifying the position of the new axis, you can exactly copy the selected axis with the scale, tick mark spacing, length, and limits of the copy linked to the original. The positioning of this axis is not linked, so we'll check the boxes next to Link X position and Link Y position. so that the axis moves with the others. The scale of an axis is determined by the linked axis scale option. Checking this box means that when the scale of the controlling axis is changed, the scale of the dependent axis changes as well. The spacing between the tick marks is determined by the link tick spacing option. Checking this box ensures that changing the spacing on the tick marks page for the controlling axis changes the spacing for the dependent axis to the same thing. The minimum and maximum limits displayed on the axis are controlled by the link limits option. When this option is checked, the limits y equals f of x equals field becomes available. This lets you insert an equation for the axis linking. By default, this is set to x, which means there is a one-to-one scaling relationship between the controlling and dependent axes. Click the Edit Function button to choose from existing equations, or type your own into the box. In this case, the controlling axis, y-axis 1, is displaying temperature in degrees Celsius, so we can show temperature in degrees Fahrenheit on y-axis 2 by typing x times 9/5 plus 32 into this field. Lastly, the length of an axis is controlled by the link length option. Changing the length of the controlling axis will change the length of the dependent axis as well. If this option is enabled, the length scale option becomes available. This is set to 1 by default, which means the controlling and dependent axes are the same length. If this is set to 0.5, the dependent axis is compressed to be half as long as the controlling axis. This concludes the video training for linking axes in Grapher 12. If you have any additional questions, please contact Golden Software.